天的节目有一个特别来宾，
没错，那就是之前已经来过我们节目超多次的说说心里话的安。
Hello， 大家好，我是安。
然后今天会邀请安来呢，是因为这一集的起源是看到标题应该知道，我们想要聊学英文这件事情。然后因为之前其实我跟舒宇已经有单独聊过一集我们是怎么学英文的，那就是前几天我在 YouTube 的时候就看到有一个影片，是一个很有名的 YouTuber 叫 Lily Chen， 然后他就是专门在做英文教学相关的影片。那他有一个影片内容是邀请一个常年在国外生活的一个 YouTuber 叫 Hackbear 泰瑞，然后他的影片内容就是教大家可能如何在国外的科技公司找工作这样子。那他们两个有个共同的背景，就是两个人都是有在国外念书过的。那 Lily 她的背景比较特别，是她是在台湾念完大学工作一阵子之后才出国念研究所，她在加拿大念了1年。那泰瑞的话，他是就是我们一般对于留学生的那种想象，就是他英文是去那边之后才变得比较流利，就是他慢慢在那边学。然后 Lily 的话，她是在台湾学的英文，然后之后是直接用她在台湾学到的英文去国外念书。对，所以我觉得这两个就是蛮有趣的，然后也想要跟大家分享一下，就借此分享说，那我们在学英文的路程上，然后因为我跟舒宇是有去国外短暂生活过1年的时间。对，然后安的话，我就想要先问问看安，你之前就是有去国外生活过的经验吗？
我之前是去美国待过一小段时间，但就是没有到1年，就是比较多是去玩或者是去其他国家玩这样，所以最长大概就是待大概6周，1个月到6周左右的时间。对，然后美国的话，大概是去了2次左右，然后上一次去就是去年的暑假的时候，大概一个月这样。
好，那所以我们接下来就会用英文开始进行这个我们如何学习英文口说这件事情。
对，那现在我们开始之前呢，还是要跟大家讲一下，就是因为我们3个呢母语都是中文，所以这个英文单集从以前到现在都算是我跟雨杰一个有点像是可以练习，然后又可以用比较欢乐的方式讲英文的一个契机啦，这样子。然后我们之后可能也会请各种好朋友一起来聊天，所以呢，因为我们都不是母语人士，所以请大家不要用太严苛的眼光来看待我们的英文单集。
没错，希望大家就是跟我们一样抱持着学习的心情。
对。好，那我们就开始咯。
好。
Okay, so welcome back to Afternoon Girls Club. I'm Andrea.
I'm Julie.
So today we have a special guest on our show, and I want to ask her to kind of introduce her, her podcast and also herself. So why don't you get started?
Okay, hello. Thanks for having me here. So I'm Anne. My podcast is named 说说心里话, and it's all talk about relationships and self-awareness and talking about how to deal with our negative emotion. So I hope I can, through my podcast, to talking psychology in a more easily way and help people to understand themselves more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And today we are going to talk about something that is I think it's talked about in our everyday life, which is language, because I think Taiwanese people are obsessed with language learning.
Yes, especially like Japanese, Korean, English most of the time.
Yeah. So first, I would like to talk about, how many languages we have acquired throughout all these years, and, what was the experience like, or what is the process like? So maybe Julie can start first.
Okay.
Because I know you have learned a lot of languages, growing up.
Well, not really. If we're talking about like officially learning from school, I only learned English since kindergarten, I would say, and German since university. Oh, and a little bit Japanese during my high school time, but I won't consider it as really learning it because I couldn't speak it. And that's actually the point of why we're doing this episode. It's because learning a language, I think the ultimate goal is to really communicate with people who speak that language. Yeah, so I would only say I learned German and English from like proper educational system, and I occasionally pick up some other language like Korean through Korean drama, but I won't say like I actually learn it.
Okay, so what about Anne?
Actually, I think to live in Taiwan, we all need one language is all we need. Like we can speak Chinese well, it's enough to daily life. But if we want to like explore our comfort zone, maybe we should learn like English. If we can speak English more, we can know like foreigners and know more other countries' culture. So I think if we can learn English better, we can maybe to reach more knowledge and something we daily life cannot reach about.
Okay, so is there any languages that you would really want to learn?
Actually, I recently think we should learn about Taiwanese.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
you know, like I really cannot speak Taiwanese well, but recently I listen a lot of Taiwanese song, and I feel like,
really?
I really love it, like 茄子蛋. And I feel like his song is really like very local and very emotional.
Yeah.
And I just because of these songs, and I want to learn Taiwanese better.
So growing up, you don't speak Taiwanese in your family?
Yeah, actually, my mother is Taiwanese, but we all speak in Chinese. What about you guys?
Oh, actually, I really love your point because my mom is Taiwanese and my mom speaks Taiwanese growing up and my dad speaks Hakka growing up. But my Taiwanese sucks and I barely speak any Hakka. So I think that's such a pity because I really think it's a beautiful thing to be able to speak something that's very, close to our culture and close to my parents. But it's very hard to be honest, because, people around me speak to me in Mandarin all the time. So I don't really have someone to practice with. And my parents, they don't really speak their Taiwanese and Hakka in their daily life now. So yeah, and to respond or kind of to like on top of what you just said, I also learned English when I was in elementary school. And also because I really love Korea and Japan, I sort of pick up a bit of Korean and Japanese, when I watch those dramas. But I think English has always been the main language that I've learned. And, up until I was in senior high school, I would say, although I know English, but I couldn't really communicate. And, whenever there's someone talking to me in English, I would just freak out because I know how to, like when I was little, I knew how to get good scores. But when it comes to speaking the language, I think I was actually unable to do it because I was not exposed to that kind of environment. So even though I knew how to write it, speaking it was kind of like something in a completely different area or different realm that I cannot just switch to. So, for a long time, I always felt frustrated because although I knew all the words, it would not come out of my mouth. So, I kind of thought I was very stupid, and I really envy those people who can speak fluent English or just like a fluent foreign language. So I don't know about you guys because I know a lot of people, they watched foreign dramas growing up and then they kind of picked up a lot of speaking skills along the way, but I wasn't like that. So I was kind of curious to, when you were in school, did you feel like you kind of knew how to get the right answers, but you didn't really know how to say the words and, do a communication properly?
Yeah, but I actually want to ask you first because I remember you said you attended several speaking contest in English during your student life, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying is like you can do the speaking contest, but you can't really have a conversation with foreigner?
Oh, that was a very interesting experience because, in speech contest, no matter in Chinese or in English, there are two parts.
Yeah.
So one is like a prepared speech. So you can, go back home and write a perfect speech and just memorize the whole thing. And the other part is impromptu speech.
Yeah.
So you will be given a brand new topic and then you have to think about what you want to say on the spot. But, the thing is, when I was preparing the speech, I was like very okay. And I knew what to say, what to write about. But then when it comes to impromptu speech, I always just froze on the stage. I didn't know what to say. I would say like, oh, there's an iPad in this picture. The baby is holding this iPad. Thank you. And then I would just leave. I would just leave and felt so bad about myself. So I was like, why is this happening? Because I knew the words, but they wouldn't help me. And they were just like in my brain, but my mouth was not used to saying those things.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I totally feel you because I remember the first time that I realized I couldn't speak English properly in a conversation is that when I was in my senior year of high school, we had to take like the biggest entrance test for college, right? And I applied to some of the schools with English major. So there's like a face-to-face interview about your English ability, whether it's speaking, writing, anything else about English. And I remember one of the speaking interview, there's a topic like you have to make a story out of a picture. It's basically just like what you encountered. And I couldn't say anything. And I remember like that picture is a baby is under a table. And I couldn't say anything. I was just like, there's a baby under a table. And the professor is like, so what are the baby doing? Crying. Like I couldn't make a conversation with him. And the only conversation I could make is something I prepared back home. Like when he asked me, why do you want to do the English major? I could tell him, why do I want to do the English major? But in a way that I prepare it beforehand. It's not like, oh, I could just speak out loud what I thought about English, what I really feel about this language. Nothing. I was just like saying like, oh, I love English growing up. I read a lot of Jane Austen novels.
But do you think it's due to your English level or it's due to the nervous?
I would say it's not just about nervous. It's also you don't really know how to speak the language to sound natively.
Oh, I see. I think like lack of confidence are always is our problem. Like in Taiwan, people tend to be have a good level in English, but they cannot speak in confidence. So I think the most problem is not about the English speaking skill or something. It's just about to stand up and to speak out your mind or your ideas.
Yeah, and I think it's highly related to the amount of your practice, because like we have been doing podcasts for almost 3 years, and I've definitely noticed that, you know, when I first started, I knew how to speak Mandarin. My Chinese was perfect, but my speaking skill wasn't as good as the one that I have right now, because I have a lot of practice, and I know when I have nothing to say, there are some sentences that I can fill in to make myself, you know, able to think about what I want to say next. So it's definitely a skill that you can practice. But when I was a student, I thought, you know, if I read enough novels or if I memorize enough vocabulary, then I would be able to speak perfect English. But then if you don't have the output, the amount of input can only help you so much. I think that's my experience and also my biggest setback, because I thought, you know, I study so hard, so why would I fail so much when I enter a speech contest? So, you know, that was the point when I realized I really need to put my heart into practicing speaking English. So that's the point kind of where I become really not like fluent, but at least able to communicate with people in real life.
Yeah, I feel like another biggest obstacle in terms of speaking in English, I still remember the first day I arrived in the US and I encountered one of my roommates. She's American. I remember that I don't know how to respond to her question like most of the time, especially when we're talking like day to day life. It's all right. But when we were talking about something like books or further knowledge, such as I remember that we talk about Harry Potter a lot because we both love Harry Potter. But if you know Harry Potter is fictionary. And there's a lot of vocabulary that's basically just made up by the author, J.K. Rowling. So if you have never read it in English, there's a lot of terms you don't know. So when we were having a conversation about how much we love Harry Potter, and then I still remember when she asked me like, okay, so who's your favorite character? Or what's your favorite spell, etc. I couldn't say any because everything I remember about Harry Potter is in Mandarin. And I couldn't really tell her how I feel about this book because everything I learned about this book is in Mandarin. Yeah, so that's like the first time I realized like, oh my God, I could talk about how my life doing with you in English, but I couldn't really having a conversation with you in some of the topics that is something we really love about. And that actually kind of sad. Yeah, and sometimes I just feel like it's really frustrated that you couldn't use a language to fully express yourself.
Yeah.
I totally feel the same. Like sometimes like language is a bridge. You can use the language to connect with others, but sometimes it just will be an obstacle because if we cannot speak that well, sometimes we just can feel very, very frustrated because like me, I always enjoy to have a deep talk with others, just cannot stay the topic in a superficial way. But compared to my Chinese speaking, it's hard to like deep down to like explore each other's opinion and ideas and thoughts. And sometimes I will just stuck in the words, how to use the words precisely or something. And it's very like opposite. And I will use like the dictionary and to assist me to find the right word or something. But actually, gradually I found that maybe it's not need to always be right. Even though that maybe my grammar can be very wrong, but actually if I can slow down myself and in a like more slowly pass and allow myself to be wrong sometimes, and I can still communicate with others.
Yeah, I want to mention another story. Like it's a story time again. I remembered it also happened when I was in the US. I was having another roommate who's from South Africa. And if you know South Africa, their official language is actually English. So they speak perfect English as well. And I remember my South African roommate, we have a little chat in the room, and she told me that you're a really shy person, don't you? And I was like, that's something I've never thought before. I have never considered myself as a shy person because I always talkative. I always like to bring up whatever we're talking. I just want to be a part of it. And she's like, yeah, you don't talk much. And I was like, really? Is that what you sees me? Like, really? Am I really not talkative enough? And then I just like after that conversation, I just sit back in my room and really have like a deep thoughts about myself and thinking like I'm basically having an existential crisis about myself. Like, who was I? I don't really know myself. Am I really a shy person or what? And then I realized that, oh, maybe it's because the language. It's because every time I want to speak in English and having a conversation with, when I know that person whose native language is English, I got nervous. I will self-examine myself. Am I going to say the correct grammar? Am I going to say like a perfect paragraph of what am I going to tell? Or if it's not, then I'm just gonna remain silent. And maybe that's why she thinks I'm shy. And yeah, I feel like language sometimes could be a really big barrier to let people to know who you really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I feel like the obsession with grammar is really fucking with our brain, especially among Taiwanese kids. Since I teach English, I know this, happens all the time. Even, when we are out of school, we still have this inner teacher telling us to be perfect all the time. But, if you listen to our own show, you know that we make grammar mistakes in our own native language all the time. We use the wrong phrase all the time. But we don't blame ourselves for being stupid because that's just what happens when we are talking so excitedly. And I think we kind of are very harsh when it comes to foreign languages, and we kind of expect ourselves to be perfect when in reality, native speakers are not perfect. So I don't know how to undo this, but maybe, our future generation can have this privilege to not be able to be obsessed with grammar or, the correct, being correct all the time.
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to ask the questions is that when did you guys know that you can actually speak the language? It doesn't have to be English, like any other language.
Do you have any, examples that made you realize this?
I think it's until I can communicate with another person, especially with foreigners. Yeah, because like in our school, we usually speak a lot of English, but in a like study way. It's not in a useful way. So when I went to like travel abroad, I started to talk in English, it's a very cool feeling. It's like, wow, I can use another language and to cover like the traveler needs, because we all need is to know where is the toilet, or to understand where how much should we pay or something. It's just easily way. So if we can do that, it will be like a little bit achievement. So that made me feel like, oh, I can use this language like in a really useful way.
Okay, so I have two examples. Like the first one is something that's I don't know if you guys have this thought, but you know, when I was in college, because I majored in English, so in my classes we all needed to talk in English and you know wrote in English. But I always had this idea that, you know, since everyone actually knew how to speak Chinese, you know, am I actually fluent? Because, you know, in class, when I was talking about my ideas in English, I was always thinking about, you know, they can understand me because they are Taiwanese, because we have the same brain. But I don't know if there's this person who is unable to speak any Chinese would be able to understand my English. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but I always have this second thought that, you know, maybe my English is only understandable to Chinese people or Taiwanese people. But it was until the point where I, you know, study in the US that I actually like confirm in my brain that, oh, my English is good. I can communicate properly. So it was a very important kind of turning point in my life. And I think it's a very big motivation for me to continue to improve and grow as a person. And the other example is that when my family and I went to Korea for the first time, because we all love Korea so much, we watch tons of Korean drama. So we picked up a lot of Korean phrases here and there, and I can make like simple conversations. At least I thought I could. But you know, when we went to Korea and then we actually ordered something in Korean, me and my brother were like, gosh, we could speak Korean. That's so magical. And my brother was just like ordering a tteokbokki, but he was like, gosh, I'm good. So
I'm a Korean expert.
Yeah, so it was very motivating. And I think it's so beautiful because when you're learning a new language, you get excited all the time. But when it comes to English, you're like, oh, I don't have enough vocabulary. My grammar sucks.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's really lucky for us that we all have a chance to experience life abroad, especially you actually use the language to communicate with native speaker. And for me, the moments I feel like, oh, I really could speak the language is just like Andrea, that I remember I learned German for about a year and I went to Germany for a working holiday. No, more like a working exchange program. And I still remember the first time I went into Burger King and I ordered something in German. And when that person responded me with German, and I could respond to her again in German. And I was like so excited. I understand what she's talking about. I understand what's going on here. I feel like I understand the culture. Like every response she gave me is sort of like a little reward that I got from the language learning journey. Especially like I just keep thinking it deep and deeper and deeper and feeling like, oh my God, I know this language. But no, the only thing I could say is like ordering stuff if it's come to German. Yeah, but that's actually something really excites people, especially in learning a language. If you could really have even just like a small conversation or just like a small talk, like any small conversation would increase your confidence of speaking the language.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Why in English we can have that high self-expect, but in other language we can just easily to get fulfilling.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually like preparing about this topic. I was like thinking, yeah, we us Taiwanese people really sort of obsessed in English speaking, especially if you have like more of a American accent.
Yeah,
and people will think like, oh my God, you speak English well, but what about if you learn English in a different way? What about you learn English in a British system, or you just learn English from, let's say, South Africa? you'll have different accents, but that doesn't mean you don't speak perfect language. Because I remember when I was in my university, I took a course which was taught in English, and I still remember, like, that's actually another moment I feel like, oh my God, I couldn't speak the English. I couldn't speak the language correctly because the professor up there, she speaks perfect English and I understand her perfectly. But still, I sometimes receive others' reactions saying like, her English is not that good. She speaks with an accent.
Oh, God.
And I just hate it.
That's a perfect segue to our next question.
Yeah.
Because it's about accent. I know it's a very touchy topic, but I think it's important to talk about this because, like you said, Taiwanese people are obsessed with certain accents. I think now a lot of people also like British accent, but like certain British accents, because, you know, the UK is a very big country and there are tons of accents. But somehow at school, kind of from my experience, people were always talking about, you know, how to sound like an American. But, you know, America is also huge. So which part of America do you want to, you know, mimic? Do you want to learn from? So I think that's a very strange thing to be obsessed about. But I have to say, when I was little, I was also thinking about, you know, since I loved Jane Austen as a kid, I always wanted to have this British accent. But because at school, we always learned American accent, or at least like standard American English. So it was hard for me to kind of learn the accent or have the environment to practice. So then I quickly just gave up this dream and kind of just accept the fact that, you know, there is no need to have a certain accent. You know, as long as I can express myself well, then, you know, that's good enough for me. Yeah. So what about you guys? Do you have a obsession with certain accents?
I think like accent is, if you have a like perfect accent, you may get more confidence of speaking, I think. But actually, you remind me of my ex-boyfriend. He worked in US in like software engineer, and in his company they are very their colleagues are very diverse, come from like India and like China and Taiwanese, and everywhere. They are a very international environment, and like, you know, like Indian people speak English is in their own way, and they don't care about their accent. They are active talker because like they will really stand for their rights, and they can just say things like very in a like ambitious way. So I think like Taiwanese compared to them, we are just worry a lot, and maybe worry about not only accent but only what can I be seen or regard if I say things like that or like what. But actually in US culture, they really like value people who can actively to speak and like speak out your opinion and your ideas. So it just I think it just, if you cannot speak like Julie's experience, people will think people cannot see you. You are like invisible, and then they will not see your value. So it's a little bit sad.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and well, I have so much to say about that because, like you said, a lot of people actually don't care about their accents because they know people can actually understand them, and that's the key point. And I think instead of being obsessed with accent, the most important thing is the pronunciation.
Yeah.
You can, you know, say things in the right pronunciation without having, you know, a perfect, like, quote unquote, American accent. But I think, you know, lots of people, they want to have traits of American accents without actually polishing their pronunciation. So I think the order is kind of, I don't want to say wrong, but if you want to be understood, then pronunciation goes first. And then if you want to be perceived in a certain image, then you can perfect your accent to be more like British people or to be more like American people. But, you know, pronunciation is always neglected by lots of students, and I don't know why. Because that's the most important thing. It's like in Chinese, you have to say things in a correct way. Then you can start to be more, you know, local, to sound like a native. But instead, if you sound like a native, but you don't have the pronunciation right, then people still don't understand you.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like Andrea is actually the right person to talk about it because she is legit an English teacher. So yeah, you definitely encounter so many students who want to achieve certain accent or certain image when speaking in English, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get back to the question you just mentioned about the accents. Am I achieving any accent, or do I ever dream to have any accent? I would say I don't really, but there's a weird trait that I will do is that whenever I read a British novel, I would imagine myself speaking in that British accent. You know, like you always have like an inner voice, and I will start reading it in my inner voice with the British accent that I imagined. Of course, it's not going to be perfect. And also, if I watch a lot of British drama that time, let's say I watch Bridgerton, like I binge watch it for like 2 days. And after that, maybe it will last for about a week. I would try to speak like them.
You know why I'm cute? Like, you know why I'm laughing? Because you suddenly reminded me that I think a few weeks ago you were talking to me and then you were like, oh, this is his daughter. I was like, what daughter? Are you from the UK?
I don't even understand what you just said.
You were talking about TikTok, and then I don't know why you were speaking English, but you were like talking about someone's daughter, and then you were saying that, you know, this is his daughter, and I was like, what is this pronunciation?
Was I really?
What is going on? But it was so fun because I knew you just finished Bridgerton. So
yeah, and another thing about my language learning journey is that I tend to learn English from drama or from TV series or reality show mostly. So I would learn a vocabulary literally from that drama or from the reality show. So I still remember there's a word that I learned from a reality show. It's a MasterChef Australia. So there's a word they use a lot of time. It's disaster. So they speak like this. So I thought the word actually, like the pronunciation is disaster. So I still remember the first time like I speak about that. Oh my God, last night was a total disaster. And people was like, why? What is disaster? I was like, you know, disaster, like something really bad happened. And they're like, disaster? So yeah, like some vocabulary is just inputted like in a different way in my brain.
I think it's so fun because I don't know, it can be embarrassing sometimes, but also I think people can understand that because when we are learning, we absorb contents from different areas, and sometimes you can mix accents, and you know it happens. It's not something that you can avoid because you know sometimes we watch British things and sometimes watch, you know, singers talking about their work in Australian accent, and I think accents can be interesting if we don't, you know, have a bias against or, you know, specifically love a certain accent. And, you know, I really want to know when you are learning a language, it can be other than English, what kind of input do you consume most of the time?
I think recently I really fascinating in a tarot YouTube channel, because when I listen to that YouTube channel, I feel like very like supportive because it's in a like mental health way, and the YouTuber's voice is really like gentle, and I feel like whenever I listen that YouTube, I feel like myself is full of energy. So I love listening that YouTube channel, and I started to thinking. Julie just mentioned, I feel it's so natural to imitate the accent you like, because like not only the accent, I think the people you like or like maybe celebrities you like, it's so natural. Even in Chinese, we will imitate some celebrities we are really love, like imitate their tone, the sentence they love to say. So I just feel like it's a symbol that we really like this person?
Actually, I was thinking about, sometimes if you want to be an anchor, then you have to speak in a certain way and in a certain tone, right? So you might want to try to learn from someone that you admire, or at least mimic their way of talking. And, sometimes I watch interviews, and if I find that person's tone and the style of their talking is very soothing, I kind of just encourage myself to be a little bit more like them. But, when it comes to your native language, it's hard because you have been speaking this language for so long. It's difficult to change anything. But at least now I try to at least pronounce my words a little bit clearer since I'm doing a podcast. But we've have always been very excited when we are recording our podcast. So it's very difficult to say things clearly in our show. But that's something I try to be more good at.
Yeah, I think the way if I am really imitating someone in my native language, I was actually imitating the way they speak it. It's like the structure of what they're talking about. Because before, if you never really encounter anyone who talks with structure, you will sometimes you say something about that over there, and then you say something about another topics over there, and people who are listening would easily get confused. But because especially during the workplace, it's really important to speak in structure to let people really understand what you're saying within a really short time. So I think if it's native language, I am really focusing on how to speak things clearly and how to just let people know what I want you to do right now.
That's a huge takeaway. The most important thing is the structure and the logic instead of having the right accent. Although accent can help you in a lot of ways, but the structure can be very helpful as well.
Yeah, it's you really set the tone about you're telling people what's really important in this conversation instead of, we're just word vomiting or anything else.
Mm-hmm. When you're learning a foreign language, do you try to find someone who uses good vocabulary or uses good sentences to copy from or to learn from? For me, because I can share an example. I recently in love with Canadian accent. So
really?
Because I like a lot of content creators from Canada. So
you mean ASMR content creator?
Or fashion content.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so whenever they are speaking in Canadian accent, I'm just kind of oh, it's so cute. So sometimes I kind of unconsciously maybe copy a little bit of traits from Canadian accents. But it was just because I'm just so obsessed with their work. And so sometimes I get influenced by them. So that's one example. And I want to know if you guys have someone that you want to learn from.
I got huge influence on Disney Channel.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, I think before I really know how to speak English, I would sort of always imagine I'm in a Disney Channel drama and having those conversations. But we all know in Disney Channel's drama, those conversations doesn't really exist. No one talks like that in real life. So I guess that's why I don't really know how to speak that language, because I don't really have a chance to really encounter a native speaker in a real life. Oh. Yeah, so of course I would imitate them, but I don't think that's the reason why I know how to speak the language. Yeah,
because the input is not from a daily life conversation. So I think, if any of you guys, not you guys, but any of the listeners, want a little bit of tip, I guess it would be listening to podcasts.
That's so true.
Because, during podcast conversations, people don't use big words. They just communicate ideas, and they are always saying things like, oh, awesome, yes, things that you can actually use in daily life conversations. And, they are very useful and they are simple. So yeah, it's a great way.
Yeah, and if you want to learn structure or logic behind a language, I recommend to listen any kind of TED Talk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's presentation. People will be prepared. So that's something if you just want to expert the language in presentation, I would highly recommend TED Talk.
And I also recommend maybe you can find a language partner. It's really helpful. When I started in college, I found some language partners before, and he's from US, and we became friends. and then we just exchange many things and thoughts. And because he also wanted to learn Chinese, and we also so we both have a very high motivation. And then the second thing is we will never laugh at each other, because we all know we both are learners. So we can, maybe sometimes we will mix Chinese and English together, but it's a good way to really learn a local speaking, like in a friendly and easy way, because the English we learn from school is too officially, but it's not the daily talk we will use. So when I talk to my foreigners friends, and what he say to me, like, oh, we will not say let's have a meeting or something, we will say let's grab something to eat. And so I learned maybe like a word or the sentence we use like more friendly way or more local way, and I will feel like, wow, that's so interesting. And sometimes they will mix two words together. Maybe like we will say, oh, that's really chill, or oh, that's really relax, and maybe they will say, we will say chillax, chill and relax, or something. And whenever I heard of these things, I will feel, wow, it's so interesting, and that's so cool. It's also like our online way to talk, and like a young generation talking ways or something. So just feel that's another good way to learn the local language.
From your experience, it reminded of something that is so important that I didn't talk about, which is empathy. I think having a partner who understands how hard it is to learn a language is so important. I'm not saying you cannot talk to a native English speaker who doesn't know any other languages. I'm just saying that, for someone who has learned maybe one or two languages, they understand how hard it is to be able to express yourself in a full sentence. So they will give you a lot of encouragement and motivation, and they would not laugh at you at any mistake, because they know it's bound to happen. So I think having this kind of partner or a group of people that you can talk to is very important. So for me, I feel like Julie is kind of my language partner, because we both know Chinese and English. So whenever, there's something that we kind of feel like it's stuck in our head, we can still talk about it in another language. And it's so convenient sometimes.
And also, if you really want an English partner, Andrea is actually a great English partner. It's just because she does English teacher as a job. Mm-hmm. So she knows what people will worry when they speak the language. And mm-hmm. Like, due to your past experience, how they feel if they couldn't speak English right, and they will be like, oh, so frustrated. But that's not true. You could just like speak the language like everywhere and anytime you feel comfortable with. Yeah. So definitely find a language partner who understand your learning path. And what I want to echoing about Anne is that you just said that what we learn from the books is usually like very official English. And I remember that I once looked at like Chinese learning books. It's also something really unpractical. Like they use like a really old way to speak Mandarin.
Like traditional way, like they are old person.
Yeah. And so that's what happened to these books. They don't really teach you how to speak day-to-day conversation. They just teach you the language, and you don't really have the chance to use it to like in your daily life. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think that's one of the frustration that you will find if you just learn from the book and you want to let that skills to transist into your daily life. But then the first barrier you're facing is that everything you learned before couldn't be used in the daily life.
Mm. Yeah. And, finally, I have one random thing to talk about since you mentioned that book thing. I once heard from an English teacher that if one wants to do good in TOEIC test, the most convenient way is to give that person a Da Vinci Code and ask that person to finish the novel. And if that person can read through the novel without, any difficulty, then that person can pass the test perfectly.
Why Da Vinci Code though?
Because Da Vinci Code is very entertaining and the language is not too difficult, but it's, I've never read the book before, so I don't know what kind of vocabulary is written in there, but I kind of agree with him because, no matter what kind of novel it is, as long as you can finish the novel and understand the content, it means that you have the basic understanding of English. And maybe that's enough for you to pass the test. I guess that's what the teacher was trying to say. And I think it's very useful because if you find something entertaining, then you have the motivation to go on and, read through the whole novel.
Yeah, I actually think reading is another really helpful thing of speaking in the language, because before you speaking, you're actually writing something in your mind and then you speak out. So reading is another way to input more information about the language. And for reading, I have a suggestion is that definitely read something more like a young adult novel first before you really get touched into like some of like classic books such as Jane Austen, because my first English novel is actually Harry Potter the Seventh, and I don't understand it at all.
Why the seventh?
It's because the seventh is the last novels in the series, and I wanted to know what happened in the end. So I have that eager. So I was like, buy me an English novel and I'll read it. But then I couldn't. It's just really hard. And I remember I read it for like 2 chapters and I stopped. And I just feel like, oh my God, I don't understand this language. My English sucks. But then after that, I started to read some more like young adult novel, especially Twilight. Actually,
I was going to mention that. I was like, Twilight is so much better than Da Vinci Code because it's definitely easier.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, so Twilight was actually helping. And after that, like more recent one is definitely To All the Boys I Loved Before. Yeah, and that's actually really helpful. If you could understand a novel like that, then you could slowly proceed into other like topics more deeper, and it's like they use more complicated words.
Yeah. So yeah, these are some tips from personal experience. And finally, our special guest, Anne, do you have anything that you want to say, or how was the experience?
I think when you just speaking of empathy, I think of one of my professor when she first went to US to study counseling. I thought that it's very difficult to be a counselor abroad, because like we are not only need to like to speak really fluent, but also have to know their culture very well. So I think if you are not a local people, it's like impossible to be a counselor there. But actually, people, my teacher say she used a very like easy English, and then they still can touch people. Like when a guy speaking of their his story, and it's very sad things, and my teacher just say, "Oh, it hurts," and then her clients just cry out. And I think there's have some very mutual language. It's besides really language. It's just maybe like empathy and like emotion things, the feelings, and like maybe your body language and nonverbal language. And it's also very important. So even when we cannot speak a country's language, I think we can still survive, because we can use our body and we can always to find a way out.
Yeah, that's a very nice ending. Yeah, I have nothing to say about that because that's a perfect ending.
That's so true.
And I think, a lot of people are in cross-cultural relationship and they don't necessarily understand each other's language perfectly, but they are in love and, they can communicate in so many ways. So I think it's totally possible to get your message across when you don't know the language so well.
Yeah, and actually, let's be honest, online translation is so much like efficient than before. And Google Translation is getting better and better compared to what we had before. And I remember there's a function that you could just take a picture of something and then it'll translate you and the language that you choose. I think it's super like efficient and handy for people who don't really understand the language, but you have to because you're in that kind of environment.
So there are still lots of ways for people who don't know the language but still be able to understand the culture or the content. But it's still fun to learn different languages, since it's also a way to know a culture a little bit better, because the language says a lot about a group of people or their habits. And yeah, I had a lot of fun in today's conversation, and I hope the listeners also have a lot of fun as well.
Yes.
So if you guys have any topics that you want us to talk about, definitely message us on Instagram or email it to afternoongirlsclub@gmail.com.
Yeah, and our Instagram account is Afternoon Girls Club. And if you have any specific comments on a specific sessions of this episode, please go to Mixerbox. It's a music app, and you could leave us a comment on there.
Yeah, and again, if you're into psychology, counseling, and anything about self-help, please go listen to 说说心理话, which is Anne's podcast.
Yay! Thank you.
So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all the stories and experiences.
Yeah, thank you. It's so nice to talking to you.
Oh, really? Thank
Yeah.
you. It's really nice to talk to you as well, because I think it's really important to sometimes bring guests to our show, because we often sort of caught up in our own thoughts most of the time, and because we're like really close friends, so sometimes we have same thoughts on a lot of things, but it's always really fun and fresh to have a new thoughts to come and join into our episode.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening, and that's the end of our show.
So Afternoon Girls Club dismissed. 好，
耶！
谢谢。
哇，天哪，我们居然可以完成这一集。
可是你真的讲了很多很好的故事哎。